What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on? Well, I know Detroit has their head held high and times are good. Jared Goff signs a big extension. The Detroit Lions sell out season tickets for the second year in a row. Safe to say, spirits are high in the Motor City because the Lions have extended every player on their team basically this offseason. And I'm sure when the schedule comes out, we'll have a ton of primetime games. The day and age of them being an afterthought, one prime time a year, which is Thanksgiving, which always felt like they were grandfathered on scholarship, feel over because that franchise has it going on. So we will talk about Goff and the franchise, and then we'll just hit on some other stories. We know Tom Brady's first game calling on Fox. Just happens to be the Cowboys. Fox setting them up for success. The Jets tried to hire someone over Nathaniel Hackett to basically run the offense. And Chip Kelly was absolutely eviscerated by DeSean Jackson and LeSean McCoy. I obviously was there for a couple months when Chip came on, but I know a lot of people, so I will give my thoughts on that, and as well as a Tangent Tuesday, have a couple takes non-football that I wanted to dive into. But before we dive in to the sporting world, I want to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. And when the schedule comes out, if you're a fan of a team and you live in a different city and you want to go see them, if your baseball team is coming to town, you live in a different city, if you want to go see a concert, a comedy show, I got you covered. Just download the Game Time app because they have access to everything. College, pro, you name it, they got you covered. I have been using them consistently now for, it feels like going on 2 years. I cannot recommend them enough. So any event you want to go to, just download that app, search, and get in on it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN, John, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN, John, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You know what's funny about certain players is not everyone is on the same trajectory, right? Some guys pop immediately. Some guys struggle and then get the right coach and then have success. Some guys basically live in obscurity for years and resurrect their career later. Not everyone is on the same path. No different than life, right? We all know people that have immediate success in whatever industry that they jump in. Some guys that screw around in their 20s, all of a sudden in their 30s, they start having financial success. None of us are alike. Whether you're an athlete, whether you're a salesman, I don't care what you do. We all have different paths that we take. And I think Jared Goff is a good example because when he was drafted number one, he played on a Cal team that was terrible. I mean, was god awful. His first year, they went 1-11. He was supposed to go play for Jeff Tedford. Sonny Dykes came in, and it was just a bad fit. Sonny's a good guy and proven to be a good coach, but he did not fit in Berkeley, his style, and it was a disaster. And then Jared Goff's rookie year was as bad as it gets. You could argue it was worse than Bryce Young's from an eye test standpoint. It was like, this guy might not be an NFL player. Then Sean McVay comes in and changes the game. And he proves immediately he's not only a really good quarterback, but like if your team's good, you can win with him in the playoffs. You can win with Jared Goff in the playoffs. Something we do not know about guys like Tua. Something we don't know about guys like Dak Prescott has not proven that. Kirk Cousins definitely has not proven that. This is a guy when the lights are the brightest, you can win with. Again, he's not going to carry your team in the sense of like a Josh Allen, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. But no one with a brain compares him to those guys. But of the non-top 5 or 6 guys, if he's on the right team, he can arguably be the best of the next group. And he's kind of proven that now twice on two different teams with the Rams and the Lions. So I said for a while that I would love to get him on the $30, $35 million a year deal. But it's kind of stupid to talk like that. Why? Because no one gets those type contracts anymore. You're either a highly paid guy or you're nothing. And it's kind of bared out, right? Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles and got $45 million a year. Well, Jared Goff goes, I'm better than him. Check my numbers, check my stats, check my resume in January. It's not really a conversation. So we got $170 million guaranteed. Now, the good thing is when you sign a guy like Jared Goff, there's no guessing. He's proven to you what he is. He's been doing this now at a pretty high level. Now, he dipped that last year with the Rams, but for the most part, he has been a pretty consistent quarterback for a long period of time. But he is not some guy, if he was a stock, that could 10x. Let's face it, when the Eagles extended Jalen Hurts, there was still a lot of unknown. He had played at a high level for one season. And hell, going back to when he was drafted, there were a lot of question marks with Jalen Hurts. And last year, you saw a little bit of an up and down, right? The coordinator position was off. It was weird. He wasn't bad, but he was nowhere near the guy before. And you just go, well, is the Jalen Hurts we saw in 2022, is that the guy? Or is this more of the up and down version that we saw in 23? I still don't know. I'm not out on him, but I wouldn't bet my 401k that he's just going to be a superstar for the next 5 years. Where Jared Goff, like, we know he's not a superstar, but we know exactly what he is. Think about the Ford family. You know what the number one selling truck in America has been for 47 years? The F-150. My dad drove one my entire life. Basically, everyone he worked with, he was in farming, drove one. My brother has now driven one for as long as he's worked in the industry. Most people do in that business. And he's not a Ferrari. He's not a Porsche or a Mercedes. But he's a pretty consistent player. And he's a guy that you know you can win with. And what's the other thing that we always talk about with quarterbacks? The intangibles. Team loves him. He's a good leader. Here's another thing that I don't think we give him enough credit for. And this goes back to college. He's pretty mentally tough. He's been through some shit. College. His team sucked. Was not good. The pros, his rookie year, awful. By the end of his time with the Rams, his coach was openly, publicly talking about how he wasn't good enough. We can't play with this guy. If memory serves me correct, he got benched going into a playoff game. And if it wasn't for, I forget the quarter, it was a Heineke, whoever the quarterback was, Wofford broke his thumb or got hurt. Maybe Jared had an injured thumb and had to come in. Could be off of my timeline. It's been a while. But Sean McVay crushed him and has since apologized. Like, I was wrong for the way I handled it. And then he got to Detroit, Dan Campbell's first year, and it was really ugly. And by the end of his second year, he's outplaying Aaron Rodgers on the road in Green Bay in the cold. And last year, he was fucking fantastic. Obviously, had a couple bad games, but on the aggregate, was a high-end player. Was easily one of the best players in the NFC at that position. Now, the bar is not as high in the NFC as the AFC, right? There's no Mahomes, there's no Lamar, there's no Burrow, there's no Josh Allen, no Herbert. Like, the best quarterbacks in the NFC currently are like Purdy, Dak, Cousins, Goff, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts. Like, that's the group. And you know that your guy can compete with those guys because we've seen it. So is this a little rich? Sure. Do the Lions feel pretty good about it? I think they do. And I also think we have to give the front office credit for there were two trades on the table. The 49ers and the Rams. They knew both teams were going to be pretty good. And they were offering multiple ones. One team had Jimmy Garoppolo, and the other team had Jared Goff. And Brad Holmes, coming from the Rams, I think easily accepted the Jared Goff trade. Now, do I believe that they thought that it would turn out this way? That within 3 years, they would be this good and have no hesitation of giving Jared Goff over $50 million a year? I don't. But they did bet on the right quarterback because Jared Goff, compared to Jimmy Garoppolo, it ain't even close. So the Lions deserve a lot of credit because pivoting off a talent like Matt Stafford, who immediately wins a Super Bowl, is not easy. You usually lose. But you could argue that the Lions won, and the Rams won too. It's truly one of the great win-win trades of big, big trades in recent memories. The Lions used that draft capital to improve their team. The Rams won a Super Bowl with Stafford. A couple years later, they're right back in the playoffs. And hell, they played each other, which was one of the better games this year in January. So a lot of credit to the Lions. This is never going to be the sexiest move. He's not the sexiest player, but he's just good. And because their team is this good currently for the next couple of years, you can win at a high level with Jared Goff. Now, over time with the cap, it could become a little more complicated, but that's not how NFL teams think. They live in the now. And they were just right there, and let's face it, they should have won the NFC Championship game. They had a 24-3 lead in the second half, or excuse me, at the end of the first half. Can't lose that game. But a big reason they were in that position was Goff in the offense. And it feels like all these players on that offensive unit, you keep your offensive coordinator. Lions got a really good thing going. The NBA playoffs are heating up, and so is the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out as the NBA postseason winds down. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, that's code JOHN, for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. They sold out their season tickets for the second year in a row. And one thing I learned when I was in radio, like growing up a kid in Northern California, I just liked the Giants and the 49ers because the majority of people did. The 49ers had been winning Super Bowls when I was really young and up through being a kid and a teenager. The San Francisco Giants signed Barry Bonds. They built this stadium and became a massive, massive brand. And they gained a lot of bandwagon fans over that time. And when I say bandwagon fans, I mean people that just casually follow. Why? Because people casually follow winners. And when I was on local radio, we had the A's and the Raiders. And from a rating standpoint, if you put on an A's game, and these A's teams were good. This is not like this last 4 or 5 years of that franchise. This is like in one of the peak Billy Bean crews, competing to win 90, 95 games and heading into the playoffs as a team to be reckoned with. And they would 4 to 5x the listenership on the Giants station than the A's. And they were both just really good teams. Why? Because one team had dramatically more fans. And whenever anyone uses, well, they just got a lot of bandwagon fans, I'd always say, welcome to the business. That's the point of this whole thing. I always noticed this when I did Raiders and Niner games or go to them, in the early 2010s, is if they play the Packers or the Steelers, how many of their fans would show up. Think about the Steelers. They've been winning consistently, just had winning teams, where when the season starts, you just say, we're going to be competitive and we're going to have a chance to not only make the playoffs, but to win in the playoffs. Since the early 1970s. If I was born a Packer fan, my entire life would have been watching winning teams. From the early 90s with Favre up until last year and what looks like moving forward. The more you win, the more people care. That's why the biggest brands not in football are what? The Yankees, the Lakers. The Warriors are a good example. I would say for the first 20, 25 years of my life, they were mainly a dog shit brand. They didn't rate. People didn't watch them on television. I'm talking locally. They didn't sniff national games. They did not matter. Well, the last 10 years, you could argue, they have been the biggest brand in the NBA. Why do you think that is? This is not a complicated formula. The Cowboys are somewhat of an outlier. They have not been to a conference championship in 25 years. And we all agree, have the largest fan base in the NFL. When you put them on TV and they are good, the most people watch. It's not a coincidence that Tom Brady's first game, official game as a broadcaster, will be a Cowboy game. Fox did that on purpose because they know he will get the biggest audience with that team. There are other teams that move the needle. The 49ers are a massive brand. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the Green Bay Packers, massive brand. The Chiefs, massive brand. There is nothing like the Cowboys. Why is that? Well, because in the 1970s, they dominated. And then in the 90s, a separate generation got to watch them win 3 championships in basically 4.5 years. So when I see the Detroit Lions selling out again, a lot of people were not watching every snap when they were struggling to win a couple games over the last 20 years. And their teams were basically consistently bad. I'm not saying people don't watch that. And I'm not saying that people that do watch that are dumb. I've watched a lot of bad teams as well over the years. We're actually the minority. We used to call them P1s in the radio business. It's kind of like the podcast business. The more casual people I can resonate with, the more successful I'll be doing this. It's why I don't get that granular with football in terms of breaking down play-by-play or teams that don't matter, because people will turn off the podcast. This isn't a very complicated strategy. So the Detroit Lions, they have 2 things going for them. 1, there's legit optimism and hope moving forward. And 2, there's like substance behind it. They're just good. So when you ever hear that term, you want more bandwagon fans rooting for whatever team you root for. Why? That means your team is doing something right. That means you are good. That means you matter. Can you imagine how many quote-unquote bandwagon fans Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have brought the Kansas City Chiefs? How many kids that never in a million years would have had a Chief jersey now have a Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce jersey? All over America. One of the downfalls I've thought of the NBA was when I was a kid, I had an Orlando Magic pair of shorts. I had multiple Chicago Bulls paraphernalia. Why? Shaq and Michael Jordan. Baseball was huge nationally in the early 90s. I knew all these players on all these different teams. I could name lineups from the Baltimore Orioles, the Texas Rangers, Seattle Mariners. Can't do that anymore. But we do that with the NFL, especially with the good teams. So props to the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell, and Brad Holmes for turning that thing around and just creating a bandwagon, because that means good things are happening. Tom Brady. Fox set him up to succeed, and rightfully so. My opinion on Tom Brady would be, if I had to lean he's going to be good or bad, I would lean good, but I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. I really am more indifferent. I'm just not going to bet against a guy with a work ethic who resonates with people. The guy we saw at the roast was obviously much looser. I do think that version of Tom, I don't mean the swearing and the jokes. I just mean when Tom Brady is locker room Tom Brady, he would resonate with the majority of America because he always resonated for 25 years with his locker room. And if you can do that, you can resonate with people on the couch. The problem is we've seen Tom Brady in more of a corporate scenario, and he feels a little stiffer. So I'm fascinated to see what guy we're going to see. If he can figure out a way to bring out that version, obviously he's got to be clean on national television. Tom will be fine because he knows football and he can be a guy's guy. But Fox is all in on this guy. And to put him on week 1, Cowboys at Browns, they know what they're doing. They're setting him up to success. Now, they're also setting him up. A lot of people are going to be watching that game. If I had to guess, 25, 30 million people. They're coming out the gates swinging. So the pressure on Tom Brady, obviously he's used to it as a player. But from a broadcasting standpoint, it's going to be interesting. In a weird way, Tony Romo got to fly under the radar. As crazy as that sounds, because our expectations, he was replacing Phil Simms, who most people thought was somewhat over the hill and kind of boring. And Tony was fresh and he was goofy and he was calling out plays. And it was just, he took everyone by storm. Well, that's not how people are coming into Tom Brady. They're coming in with just enormous expectations. I, like you, will have that audio up. Fascinated to hear what he's got to say. And it'll be fascinating because there's going to be no room for error early on in terms of the judgment. Now, ultimately, Fox just cares how many people watch. And I think a lot of people are going to watch. But in a weird way, off the field, you could argue Tom Brady's one of the more fascinating storylines coming into the season. What's he going to be like on TV? Because we've seen a lot of famous guys over the years go on television and suck. It is a completely different medium. You have to be loose when the red light goes, but you also got to be informative. You also got to just know when to talk, know when not to. It's just difficult. It is not easy. What I do compared to that is dramatic. I just talk. I can say whatever I want. You can't do that there. Can't swear. Tom clearly swears a lot. You can't just talk forever. You have to be in and out. You got a producer in your ear. And I know he's been practicing nonstop. Collins mentioned on his podcast. It's different when the play's going. So it's going to be fun. And a lot of people are going to watch that first game. I think the Jets are just consistently one of the most dysfunctional organizations in all of sports. And I don't think it's because of coaches or general managers. I'm not acting like Joe Douglas is Bill Polian and Robert Saleh is, Belichick. But you could argue it's very, very difficult in that scenario when you work for that owner to function at a high level. Because I think he's terrible. And I've heard this countless times from people in the league. Like, you don't quite understand what this guy has to deal with Woody Johnson. I've been told by a couple people, if you remember when Joe Douglas was first hired, it took a while for the deal to get done. And I know people were in Joe Douglas's ear under no circumstance because he kind of had him by the balls. Remember, it was a little late. If you're going to sign with the New York Jets to be the general manager, you better get every penny possible because people go there to fail because of Woody Johnson. He is very, very difficult to work with. He's always in your shit. He is not one of those owners that are like, hey, we'll hire you. You just cook. He comes with ideas. He comes with, we're doing this. So when I read that the Jets look to hire someone over Nathaniel Hackett, my first reaction was, that feels like a Woody Johnson idea. Because no coach or GM, if you have an offensive coordinator, whether he's good or bad, would keep that guy and then hire someone over him. You would just fire that guy and then hire a new offensive coordinator. And I think one big issue for the Jets that no matter what players they have on the team, the hardest thing to overcome is Woody. And I think we have immediately seen that since Woody came back from wherever the hell he was. It's tough. It's a difficult individual to have around because we've seen the best owners support you with their checkbook and stay out of your way. It doesn't mean you're going to get everything right. It doesn't mean that, your coach and your general manager are the biggest geniuses in the league. But for you to have a chance at success, you have to let them do their job. It's the reason you hired them. It's the reason you pay both guys millions of dollars. And that's just not what the Jets do. They always consistently have dumb ideas. And I think a lot of those dumb ideas stem from the owner. eBay Motors is here for the ride. The first car I ever got, I was 16 years old. And my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back. And you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit. Because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that third row seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. DeSean Jackson and Shady McCoy. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't one of my favorite videos that I've ever watched. They basically did an hour podcast, the two of them, talking non-stop shit about Chip Kelly. And they called several people throughout the podcast, Jason Peters, Jeremy Maclin, Brandon Graham, on their phone and put it on the mic to ask them what they thought of Chip Kelly. And it was ugly. And I would recommend if you want to just be entertained and laugh a little bit, to turn it on. And I can't speak for DeSean as much, but a lot of dinners when I worked for the Eagles during the season, me and the scouts would have, and Selleck and Shady were there a lot. I would say there wasn't anyone that didn't get along with LeSean McCoy. He's one of the more easygoing guys to like. He's just kind of a magnetic personality, and you can tell in this video, he's just an awesome guy to have in your locker room. And they both despised Chip Kelly. Now, obviously, I got fired. Howie technically called me, but I got into an argument in a draft meeting with Chip Kelly over Matt Barkley. And in my short interactions with him, it was very short. Like, I'd be lying if I have a great feel for him as a person. My first reaction, because I felt like he forced me out, I don't like him, but it's not because I dealt with him a lot personally. I know a lot of people, though, that spent the next several years around Chip Kelly. And I got to say that I second, third, and stamp everything those guys say. Every story I ever heard about the guy was he was a complete douchebag. And one of the themes of their podcast, and this other players had said this as well, is he really struggled to talk with the black guys on the team. Listen, I knew a lot of scouts that were white guys that thought the same thing. Like, I think he really struggles to interact with people. And I think from everyone I've ever met, think he's a complete fraud. And they hammered this. He would say one thing to your face and do something else behind your back. I've always thought this, having firsthand knowledge of people I'm very close with in the league. He's just a legitimately bad guy. I just don't think he's a good person. And I've been around good people in the sport of football. I worked for 2 years around Pat Hill, high quality, high character guy. Obviously, the same thing with Andy Reid. But there were a lot of guys on that staff, just good people. Doug Peterson, Sean McDermott. I mean, these guys went on. Todd Bowles, just nice guys. Just easy to deal with. Chip Kelly was not that guy. And I think everything they said, I said this forever as growing up a UCLA fan. I couldn't believe, one, that they hired him. I think he has been one of the biggest con artists in the sport of football since the Eagles thing ended. He conned the Niners out of a job. He conned UCLA out of a job. And now he's at Ohio State, mainly because he got Ryan Day's career started in the NFL when he hired him with the Eagles. I think both guys are very, very lucky that Jim Harbaugh left Michigan and went to the Chargers. Because I think if Jim Harbaugh just would have been like, you know what? I'm good on the NFL. I'm just going to stay at Michigan and build a bully. I think he would have ended them. Now, Ohio State, Might end up beating him now. Sharon Moore, it's going to be, a drop off, obviously, with Harbaugh gone. But I just think Chip Kelly's a bad guy. And I think they hammered that home. No one trusts him. I just think he's one of the bigger frauds in the business. And whatever he did revolutionary, which he did back in Oregon, it's 2024. No one gives a shit. The way he treats people. I've just never heard a good thing over the last 10 years of anyone that works for him. And listen, it's football. Tensions are high. People have bad moments. Welcome to life. But the way that he consistently acted toward people, it's consistently the most negative thing that I hear in the sport relative to any other person. And I'm not one just to say this. Like Brandon Staley, I ripped as a coach. I don't know him as a guy. Like it has nothing personal. Like this is personal with Chip Kelly, the way he treats people. So I'm glad those guys did it because I've never seen anything like that. Think how long football has been going. Think how many players that are out of the league could do that to different coaches. But they don't because it'd be basically impossible. It'd be really, really hard. I mean, they easily went for an hour doing that and getting other guys. And it's not just like Jeremy Maclin, super high character, normal, well-liked guy. Brandon Graham, I mean, is one of the more famous Eagles of the last decade. Jason Peters, a little bit of a wild card in his early days, but one of the best, as those guys said, the best player on the team has been playing in the NFL still. I think he was playing last year. It's like 42 years old. Everyone likes the guy. They fucking couldn't stand him. Because you know what they knew? And this is where I know the race component comes in, but I truly don't believe it's about that. Because if one of his players, if one of his scouts was on fire in his front yard, I don't believe Chip Kelly would piss on him to put him out. I truly believe that to my core. And I think he's kind of good working some of these media guys. Listen, I know Colin likes him. Joe Klatt always stands by him. I think he's a complete con artist. So I'm glad that they put that out. Complete fraud. And I wish Harbaugh would have stayed one more year so he could kick the shit out of those two guys. Tangent Tuesday. Just two things. One, I'd be lying. I'm not some huge hockey guy. I don't watch regular season hockey. I don't even really know, besides like Conor McGregor, most of the good players in the NHL. I have watched a decent amount of playoff hockey. It is fantastic. It is like the UFC meets a puck and an ice rink. The violence, the physicality, the intensity. It is just a fantastic sport. The level of give a shit from every single person, coach and player, you're on the edge of your seat. I mean, I basically watched all the Edmonton Vancouver game last night. I don't have money on these. I have no money on these. And I was like, this is a fantastic product. And I get relative to the other major team sports, it's not as big in America. But if you just like competition and you like physicality and violence and just intensity, playoff hockey is just an awesome sport to watch. And last but not least, one thing I just can't quite wrap my head around, and I see this non-stop, is former NBA players and people on TV talking shit about Nikola Jokić. That'd be the equivalent of like someone being like, Patrick Mahomes, he's just, I don't see it. I don't quite understand the hype. If you just have been watching basketball for 5 years and you watch 2 games of this guy, you're like, yeah, this is one of the best players I've ever seen. I've been watching the NBA for 30 years. He's easily one of the most dominant players I've ever seen. And good guy, not some self-promoter, champion, MVP. I don't get it. I truly don't get it. Is it jealousy? Is it because he can't jump? I don't understand it. If you watch a Jokić game, consistently he's putting up like 38, 10, and 15. He is kicking the shit out of whoever he is playing. Like, it's not even debatable how good the guy is. And it's not like he's some overhyped player that always gets bounced in the first round. He literally won the championship last year. And after these 2 games, probably going to win the championship again this year. But even if he doesn't, like, he is clearly a high-level championship, incredible teammate. I just don't understand. Every time I look on the internet, Instagram, Twitter, flip on TV, and one of those people are talking shit. It's one of the most baffling things I've ever seen. I understand they're polarizing players, right? You see it with Josh Allen, you see it with Lamar, James Harden over the years, even LeBron before he won a championship. I get it. But like once you prove you're the best player on the best team, what are we discussing? And you just consistently run circles around everyone. You are the best player in the world. Like it's not even debatable. Yet people, I guess, are always going to hate. Like I can't fathom not enjoying watching that guy play / thinking he's overrated or something. I can't get it. I think of all the athletes I've ever watched in my entire life, that's probably the biggest head scratching take that I consistently see ever.